Hey guys, in today's video, we're going to talk about the right elbow or the trail elbow during the downswing. The ability to get your right elbow and arm back in front of you during the downswing is one of the absolute fundamentals to a great swing that produces consistent results. Now, there's two ways that you can get the trail arm back in front of you that I'm going to talk through. One really good checkpoint you need to know about and hit, and a couple feels and drills that we'll walk through. I want to talk to you today about live view golf. Now, you guys hear me say all the time that you need feedback when you're practicing. You need to know if you're actually doing what you're trying to do, and the best way to give yourself feedback ultimately is video. And not only is video the best way to give yourself feedback, but being able to see yourself simultaneously as you're doing a movement is the best form of video feedback. It's the best way I've seen to make changes in your swing and be able to correlate the differences between your feels and your reels. Live view is super easy to use and set up. Simply set it up behind or in front of you. You connect it with your iPad or phone, pop that on the ground. You can actually do your practice, see yourself as you're doing it, the best way to expedite your process. I encourage you guys to check out Live View Golf. We'll put a link in the description down below with a coupon code. All right, guys, Eric back outside at the Bethlehem Golf Club. Right arm during the downswing. As I mentioned, absolute fundamental for you to be able to get the trail arm back in front of you. We're going to talk about that and those two ways and how it really affects your impact and release angles. Before we do, if you're struggling with your trail arm, golf swing, game, life, whatever, check out CogornoGolf.com. Schedule a free 15-minute phone call with myself. Would love to help you with your game. I need to be able to see your swing, so it gives you the ability to send your swing in. We could work together there. Also, if you like this right elbow video, if it helps you out, send it, share it to a friend. Click that like button down below. Click subscribe if you're new. We would appreciate that. So, right arm back in front of you. There's two key movements that are going to dictate whether your arm gets back in front of you or stays behind you. And that is internal and external rotation of your shoulder, which I'll talk you through, and adduction or abduction of your arm, which again I'll talk you through. The look that I'd like to fix, that I see a lot over my years of coaching and on Cogorno Golf, is an impact look where the butt of the club's too far back, there's no shaft lean, and the right elbow and arm are too far back, compared to what we would see a really good impact look like, where that right elbow is much more forward, the shaft's more forward, better contact. Part one, if you get into a position here where, let's just say the club's parallel to the ground, and reference my forearm relative to my upper arm, right? So elbow, wrist, shoulder. Now, the more I internally rotate would look like this. So internal rotation would be my elbows behind my wrist, my palm faces the target, my elbow points behind me. So elbow behind the wrist, that's a key alignment. This would be obviously bad. External rotation, which we want, now watch this change here. Now my elbow's in front of my wrist, and if you drew a line down this bicep, this humerus bone, that would be in front of my forearm. That is external rotation, and piece number one that's going to allow me contact. Look at how this just changes my wrist angles and my shaft lean when I go to internal rotation, the bad version. Automatically that makes me throw, automatically that takes away my shaft lean. Okay, now if internal rotation, elbow pointed behind me, wrist in front of my elbow, leads to my trail wrist throwing, no shaft lean, flip motion. Right? I see golfers all the time who look like this, and they say, how do I fix my flip? Their trail arm's way behind them. You have to get your trail arm in front of you first. So if this is bad and leads to flip, then that means this is good. How I keep my trail wrist bent back is by having more external rotation. So my elbow is in front of my wrist the most, we'll talk about the most, but for the longest period of time, for me to be able to get the handle forward. That's a really key concept for us to start with. The second part is adduction, abduction. You hold your arm out in front of you, about shoulder high like this, and reference your bicep to your pec. Now, if that distance gets farther apart, that would be abduction, abduction. Bad during the downswing. Now, if you reference this distance again, and this bicep gets closer to your pec, that would be adduction, adduction, good during your downswing. If I just put the club in when I do that, if I have abduction, bicep farther from pec during the downswing, that puts my arm and club where? Way back here. How do I get to the ball? Flip. If I take that same thing and I do adduction, adduction, I get this bicep closer to my pec. What does that do to the handle? That pushes it forward. Well, if the handle's forward, then I can have what? Right? Shaft lean, good contact, consistency. So during your downswing, to get this really good impact look we want, to get your right arm in front of your body, what gets your arm in front of your body? Watch this. External rotation. So I'm gonna get my elbow forward of my wrist. Okay, now that moved my elbow forward a little bit. Now, what else do I do to get my elbow forward? Adduction. So how I get my right arm in front of me during the downswing is not by jamming my elbow down to my hip, that's shoulder flexion extension. How I get it in front has some to do with it straightening, but it has more to do with external rotation and adduction. I see some people talk about that. You get the arm in front by straightening it. Nah, that's not the whole story. You have to externally rotate it. So during this impact position, this delivery position, and this is the checkpoint we want to go for, you want to, by the time the club is parallel to the ground, I've got a 7-iron, I believe, the butt of the club should be roughly in line with the back of the ball. Now to get that there, my arm's got to be in front of my hip. So my feels here are that my elbow's more forward of the target than my wrist. Not my wrist more forward than elbow. Elbow more forward than wrist. If we could show both these camera angles, look at the difference in where the shaft goes too. Internal rotation, elbow behind my wrist, shaft way outside. A lot of people think they have an outside path, which they do, but that comes from this internal rotation. You could change that with your shoulder. So, elbows in front of wrist. Note my elbow points at my hip. My elbow doesn't point behind me. That'd be bad internal. Elbow at my hip. This is the position that I want to be able to get myself into. Butt of the club in line with the back of the ball. Wrist and elbow at this point will be pretty much right in line. Elbow points at my hip while the club's parallel to the ground. Now part of this butt of the club getting forward is from shifting and turning. So it's not all arms, but a big part of getting the handle forward is getting your right arm forward. Get your right bicep pushing into your right pec into the follow through. It's a huge part of this as I do this. So as I'm hitting, if I'm talking just feels, that would be what I would start with during my downswing. I would feel my elbow in front of my wrist longer, not jamming my arm down, elbow in front of my wrist longer. My elbow points to my hip. There's some space between it as I'm working an impact, and my right bicep pushes into and against my right pec. If you want simple feels, it's about as simple as it gets when you're talking external rotation, adduction, right? You gotta spell those things. I gotta get my elbow in front of my wrist and my bicep into my pec. Elbow in front of my wrist, bicep into the pec. One more time. Elbow in front of the wrist, bicep pushes into the pec. So if I just wanted to keep it simple, I would do those things. The purpose of those is to be able to keep my right wrist bent back, get the handle forward. Purpose of getting the handle forward is lowering the dynamic loft and compressing the ball. Purpose, of course, of lowering the dynamic loft and compressing the ball is longer, straighter, more fun when you play. Elbow in front of the wrist, bicep pushes across the pec. Yeah, good. Now, when you're doing this, you want to be able to record from face on, and you're looking at that checkpoint. When the club's parallel to the ground, the butt of the club's roughly in line with the back of the ball, my elbow points towards my hip, and the wrist and the elbow are pretty much in a straight line at that point. You don't want to have the elbow behind the wrist, because as soon as you do that, like keep your elbow back here and try and get to the ball. You have to throw your wrist. I have to get my arm forward. Keep this elbow and wrist alignment, push my bicep across my pec. So elbow in front of the wrist, bicep pushes across the pec. Okay, huge caveat number one. You have to make sure that the toe is at least on top of the heel. So the club face is at least square to the path to be able to do this. If you've got the toe behind the heel, which would just be an open club face, if you've got the toe behind the heel, your brain's always going to internally rotate, do all the bad things. Throw the wrist, wrist in front of elbow, elbow points behind me, high dynamic loft, weak shots. So if you want to do this, you have got to make sure that the toe's in front of the heel. I don't care much how you get there, meaning it doesn't matter as much to me what grip style, what wrist angles you want to use. I have some preferences, but you have to get the toe in front of the heel, because the more that you externally rotate like this, the more you do these pieces, that's not going to help close the club face, but it is going to help keep the face square to the path and push the shaft forward. So you have to make sure the club face is square, maybe even toe in front of the heel a little bit. Then you're feeling elbow in front of wrist, right bicep against the pec. And if you do that correctly, like, I mean, that is as compressed as I could hit a golf ball. Like that ultimate compression you're looking for, you need those three variables. The toe has to be at least on top of the heel or in front. You have to have this alignment, and you have to have some adduction. Okay, quick caveat number 2. Lots of people, when they're trying to get external rotation and feel this adduction, right? And that's about the amount you need. Hold your right arm in front, right? If I took my setup, my right arm's angled in a little bit. Now during the backswing, that's going to separate from my body, abduction. So during the backswing, it's going like this, probably to about 45 degrees. So you need to literally get it from this angle all the way to impact, which is the hands over your leg. So just to feel how much it is, put your right arm about 45 degrees, bend your right wrist back, probably bend your right arm, but that needs to get across your pec to the point where the handle gets in line with your leg. That's the amount of adduction you need. The amount of external is the elbow on top of the wrist or slightly in front. Now the caveat here, I see a lot of people trying to do those moves, they get their left shoulder, left hip way up too high to try and, I see this jam elbow in front with the left shoulder up. That's not it. When you go to the top, your left shoulder's lower, it should stay lower in transition. You need to feel this elbow in front of wrist move as your left shoulder stays lower and your left hip initially. Do not raise up real high early to try and get that look in transition. Okay, so how do we practice these things? Now, ultimately, video is always going to be the best way to do this. Record yourself from face on and check yourself against those checkpoints. Is the butt end of the club in line with the back of the ball at last parallel with the shaft? Is my elbow and wrist, or are they right on top of each other? Is my elbow pointing towards my hip, right? Am I able to push my right arm forward enough to get the handle enough? As you're pushing your right arm, your bicep across your pec, of course, your body's not doing nothing, right? You're gonna be still turning, tilting, extending. It's the same things, but just to get a feel for that. The first thing I would do to feel this adduction, I'd put a glove under the right armpit, and I'd be feeling like I'm squeezing my bicep against that glove and against my pec, and it's working across my body. That'd be the feel that I have. The glove's under there just kind of for effect. And I would start with half ones as always. Keep the elbow underneath, so my right elbow should be underneath my left from face on. Push my right arm against my pec as my body's obviously opening. So to practice the adduction, glove under, push the right arm across the pec as your body's opening. And that's just, I mean, that's as solid as I can hit it. When you look at yourself on video, your handle should be more forward, and it's not, you're not shoving your hands forward, you're just moving your arms across your body as they should. That's not shoving your hands forward. Your body's still opening as I'm doing this, but my arms need to go across. You see that Adam Scott video, his arms are working across his body as he's doing those. They're not just doing nothing, right, in literal terms. So glove under, push my right bicep across my pec as my body opens. Yeah, and that's solid. Okay, so the last part here in terms of practicing the external rotation, now really I would start with just feels. I would start by feeling the elbow in front of the wrist longer. to feeling like my right elbow squeezing closer to my left. You should feel a little bit of a pull, a little, a little tightness in your trail shoulder as you're doing that, and you're trying to keep that for longer. Now, if you're not able to produce that from a feel perspective, by feeling the elbow in front of the wrist, by feeling the right elbow squeezing closer to the left, something like a tour striker ball can be effective. Now, the tour striker ball is going to keep your elbows closer and can help get the right arm more external. I don't care as much how you set up or what you do during the backswing. There's some pieces that'll make it easier, but frankly, all I really care about is that you're good here. But you can use this to squeeze the ball together, put it just below your elbows pointed towards your hip. As you're working in the impact, obviously the right arm will be underneath the left, and your ability just to hit some little ones first with this end, with little half swings. Not only are you going to get the external rotation, you'll get some good body motions as well. All right, guys, so just a quick recap here, maybe not so quick, but I need to get my right arm in front of my body. The point of that is to be able to get my hands forward enough to hit the ball solid. There's two main movements that are going to do that. That's external rotation and adduction. To be able to do those two moves, in order to get the handle forward, you have to have the club face good to go. So at last parallel, the toe is going to be at least on top of the heel or slightly in front. Your left shoulder and hip should stay lower in transition as you do these two movements. This is going to basically be the same for all clubs. When you're practicing, I would start with arms parallel to arms parallel as a stock practice. Put the glove under to feel the adduction squeezing. Add an object between your elbows if you need to feel the external rotation, or just use the feels. Record yourself and check yourself at last parallel. The arm is not external enough if the elbow and wrist aren't in line. So this is too internal. You don't need to go crazy. It shouldn't be way, way, way forward, just slightly forward. And your handle's not forward enough if the butt of the club isn't even with the ball at P6 or over your left leg at impact. That means you need more of the adduction. When practicing, go to left arm parallel. Make sure the right elbow's underneath the left. Keep it underneath the left the whole time. Feel those feels, use video, etc. If you guys did enjoy this video, we're going to put a card on the screen. We did a video with Steve about the elbow staying closer to the trail wrist. Really good video. I would highly suggest you watch that one. We'll also put the card for Cogorno Golf. That's where you can send in your swings. We could work together, help you with your trail arm and hitting the ball more solid. Thank you guys for watching.